Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our Bitmap2Material tutorial series. In the previous tutorial I showed you how you can create your own material, your own texture within Bitmap2Material and import that into iClone and apply it to a number of different planes. In this tutorial we're going to look at creating seamless textures. You can see these are the results that we have from the previous tutorial. We get some nice lighting effects on these metal objects here with a lion's head engraved on them. So what we're going to do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit and we're going to apply some seamless textures to these two planes, the wall plane and the ground plane here. Alright, so in order to do that we need to go back over to Bitmap2Material here, and we'll just load in our texture. You'll want to go over to File and Reload to reset all the properties, all the parameters there. And we'll load in our lion's head here, or sorry, not lion's head. Go back to the tutorial folder, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load in our floor. So I'm going to load in this floor texture here. And we'll load in that bitmap diffuse tweak, and you can see here that indeed we have a nice stone tiled floor, fairly aged looking. Now we're going to just adjust a couple of parameters really quickly here. This is kind of a review from the last tutorial. For the global, for this particular one, if you go into if I go into a different shader here, and if I have the shader set as shader list parallax material, I can go down to tiling here on the very bottom, and if I increase the tiling value, you can see that we start to see a pattern emerge. We see kind of like a similar pattern repeating over and over and over again. So what I'm going to do to remedy that is, first in our global settings here, you can use a make it tile method. Now there's one called offset. If I select offset, you can see the result that has, and you can select the offset tiling precision as well, and that'll kind of show you the result right there. We can normally just leave that about at a default value, and we can also use a splat as well. So you can see the splat with the result that has right there, and you can adjust the splat angle as well if you want, and that'll give you all kinds of different results. Really depends on what you're going for. I'll just leave that at 0 right now. We'll kind of leave it on the X and Y axis. We can also adjust the depth balance, which warps the texture inside or outside the height map bumps. So you can see it doesn't have much of an effect right now. So we'll just move on from that. So we'll go close down our global. We can decrease the tiling. So now we basically have our, if I zoom out, we have our seamless texture already set up. So I'll just go in and adjust a couple of values here. Back to our normal map here. Zoom in on our, we can close this down right now. Let's zoom in on our texture here. We can adjust the medium details in the normal map. And like I did in the last tutorial, you can watch the last tutorial for more details on what exactly these do. We'll just adjust the large details, increase those a little bit. And we don't want to do any pinching right now either. We can soften the map slightly. Don't want to be too soft. Just something like that would be good. And you can see the result that it has right there. I just rotate around to make sure everything looks good. And of course you can adjust, you can sharpen the normal as well, but we won't do that for this tutorial. I'll just close down the relief. With shape recognition, you can see the result that it has in the normal map when I increase or decrease the intensity there. Probably want that to be fairly high. And of course, we're going to set the angle for this one as well. There we go. And normal shape recognition, want to probably increase that fairly high. You can see the result that it has on the texture there. Height shape recognition as well. And AO. So we'll just close that down for now. Specular is going to be important for this texture here. What we want to do is we want to increase the amount of specular influence, diffuse influence there. Move to our specular map so you can see what's happening there. You can see that creates a nice reflective surface. I want these stones to seem kind of polished, a bit more polished, as opposed to so dull. That has a double effect of creating more highlights as well as making it seem more appealing. Maybe you can sharpen that a little bit to create a bit more textured look on the surface. So you can see there that the reflection is a little bit more textured there. And adjust the specular levels in. We want it to be that shiny. Maybe something like this. That should be good. Mostly we'll just adjust the lower levels there. There we go. Just keep it something normal. And for the low levels we can increase or decrease that as well. There we go. We don't want anything too extreme. Now ambient occlusion is going to be fairly important for this texture as well. I'll you can see the definite result there. The ambient occlusion is very effective on this texture here. Really brings out those stone tiles there. Almost seems like they're three-dimensional if you look at them from certain angles. That's the illusion of the diffuse map and the ambient occlusion combined. Right, you can adjust the light strength as well. We'll leave that fairly far down. The light distance, maybe about there should be good. We'll give this the same angle as we did with our shape recognition. There we go. And then of course your ambient occlusion levels. We don't have to be too dark. The maximum level when you bring that, whoops, not that low. There we go. Something about there looks fairly nice. So you can see the result that we have right there. So that's a fairly nice looking ground texture. We can also further adjust the curvature as well. Go back to our diffuse map to take a look at what this does. And probably want to just leave it fairly low. It's adding a bit more emphasis to those to the kind of the grass and stuff between the tiles, which I don't like. So I'll just leave that fairly average. And we'll close that down. And our lighting, we don't really need to worry about the lighting for now. Maybe decrease the highlights slight bit, and the shadows. There we go. Alright, so that's about all we're going to do for this map. We'll go through the same procedure, export it as a bitmap, and we'll choose our browse for another folder. We'll create another folder called ground. This is a good way to organize your textures. So we'll open up the ground folder, and we'll select that folder there. And of course we only want those 4 maps: ambient occlusion, diffuse, normal, and specular. And we'll go ahead and export those. Make sure, of course, that you have a single frame selected. We'll export that and close it down. Alright, so now let's move into iClone and import those in. So we'll load in our texture right here. Now another cool way you can import the textures I'll show you here. If I go into the ground section here, our ground folder, and I right click and drag this diffuse map, I can right click and drag that onto my ground plane there. And then I have the option of selecting 2. Now I'm going to import it as a diffuse map. So that's another cool, convenient way that you can click and drag. And of course we have that same thing with the alpha channel data. So we'll just, for this one we can just decrease the opacity all the way down. And we'll map this to the plane as well. There we go. Now you can see it's kind of stretching it out a little bit according to the shape of my plane here. So maybe I want to tile that a little bit. Let's tile it about 3 and 2. And then apply that. There you go. There you can see we have a nice, much better effect right there. All right, you can see it still looks a little bit flat though. It looks quite good, but still a little bit flat. So we'll add our other maps in here as well. Let's load in our bump map. I'll go back to that ground folder there. And for the bump map, we'll load in our normal here. Open that up. And you can see the result that has. If we increase the strength, we'll get even more shadowing and more detail on the tiles as well. You can see there's almost like a little bit of wrinkling effect on the tiles there. Gives them a little bit more of a kind of interesting texture there. They're flat, and then you can see the result. It gives kind of a much more three-dimensional look. I really like that kind of effect. On the specular map, we'll do the same thing. Go back to our ground folder there. Specular, there it is. Now specular, of course, like I mentioned, you won't see much of an effect until you increase the specular value there. So you can see you can find your balance between the specular and glossy right there. And of course, holding the / to move your lighting around, you can see the effect that it has on the map right there. And of course, if we move around, you can see that there's a pretty cool effect, some kind of very polished stone effect there. That's kind of what we're looking for right there. So our texture is already looking pretty good. So let's just bring in, for the final touch, let's bring in our ambient occlusion map there. Go to that ground folder again there. And there's our ambient occlusion. Take a look at the effect that has. It just adds that extra little final touch. You can see now it really appears three-dimensional. A lot of those tiles are really popping out quite nicely. So that's the effect we're going for. Now let's do the same thing for the wall. So I'm just going to Alt-Tab over to my B2M again, and we'll just reload to make sure we reset all our values there. Go into our folder. We're just going to load in this stucco here. Stucco wall. Create a nice stucco wall. Load in the diffuse bitmap tweak. And you can see that's the texture we're going to add to our wall there. Now, of course, for this one, we want to create a seamless texture. So I'm going to go to global again. We can just X and Y, we can splat this one. You can see it's very For textures like this where they're very sandy, there won't be much of a result. Sometimes you don't even really need to tile them. We'll just do it anyways for this case. So then we'll just go to our diffuse channel. We have everything set up. Maybe a bit more contrast we could do with. Just a little bit more. I normally like to add a little bit of contrast just to give that feeling of depth. The normal map, we'll move to that really quickly. Maybe add a bit more strength to our normal. You can see the effect that that has on a sandy texture in the normal map, just adding more details. Fine details. For this one, won't really matter a lot. Let's zoom in on our texture here and take a look at a closer look at what's going on here. So you can see the result right there. If we adjust the fine details, it's kind of making those particles appear even smaller. Medium details, very similar. We'll just kind of leave those at the default right now. We won't want to pinch these either. Maybe soften things a little bit, not too much, because we do want those small details in this case, because we do have small particles in our texture. So I'll close down the relief for now. Shape recognition, we don't really need to worry about. Specular, we don't really need to worry about this. It's going to be a very plain. It's not going to be shiny at all. However, because it is after all a stucco wall. Sorry. Ambient occlusion we might want to adjust a little bit. Let's bring in some ambient occlusion here, just a slight bit, nothing too much. We can decrease the spread slightly. We just want a very slight ambient occlusion effect. I'm just doing this to show you the results for different kinds of textures. The light distance, we can increase that. You can see we get a nice little bit of result there. Of course, you want to adjust that position of the lighting as well. All right, so at AO levels, we can maybe fool around with that a little bit. We'll just basically leave that where it is. We don't really need to worry about the curvature, the lighting. The particles in this texture are a little bit too small to be affected by that. We're just going to have a basic flat texture. You can see it looks almost like coral or else stucco on the side of a house. So we'll just leave that the way it is, and we'll export it as a bitmap. We have all the specular, normal, diffuse, ambient occlusion selected. Let's go into a new folder here. Let's create a new one called wall, just to keep things organized. There we go. We'll, double click on that, select folder, and everything else looks good to go. So let's just go ahead and export that. We got our 4 material maps there. We'll close that down. All right, so now we need to go over to iClone again here. And in iClone, we can actually use the technique I mentioned earlier. Just right-click and drag the bitmap onto the object here. There's 2-box one as a diffuse map. And of course, we have that opacity thing right there. So let's decrease the strength. And we need to map that properly. It looks a little bit distorted there. So we'll bring this the tiling down to about maybe a 4 and then a 3 because it's fairly elongated there on the z-axis. There we go. And we can also rotate that as well if we put something like 90 degrees and apply that. You can see the result right there. So you get a nice seamless texture right there. And in addition to the ground, it looks fairly nice. All right, so let's go ahead and load in all the other maps there as well. So I'll bring in the bump map. I'm going to go to that folder, the wall folder. There's our bump map. You can see a nice, you can see it's gradually layering on and adding a bit more of a nicer effect onto that wall there. Specular map, we won't really worry about too much in this case, like I mentioned. The blend map, ambient occlusion, that'll have a bit more of a nice effect. We'll go into the wall folder here. Ambient occlusion right there. There you go. Quite nicely. Works quite nicely. We'll want to make sure we select the correct specular map there as well. Go back to the wall here. And there's our specular map. You can see it's very dark, so we're not going to have much reflection on this map here. The blending maybe a little bit too dark for my tastes. We'll bring that up, decrease that effect a little bit. Just have a nice slight effect. Our bump map as well, we can increase that. There you go. Just want to find the nice balance between those two right there. You can see the nice result. We have a very nice looking stucco wall right there. All right, we can just move the light around to see the final effect. There you can see that nice effect on the stucco wall, as well as the nice reflection we get on the ground as well. Like I mentioned before, you can see we don't even have any special lighting applied, but we do have a nice reflective effect on our ground plane there as well. All right, so we'll just leave that as is. We'll move on to the third tutorial now. The third tutorial is going to be dealing with how you can make this scene look its best within iClone using various material settings as well as effects.